7 p.m. here, just turned 7:01. So yeah, Office of the Man, welcome. And of course, Horse, good to see you. Good to see you. Good to have you back. Um, Today we're speaking about Ballad Dodd. Now, I don't have, shall we say, I don't have a finally prepared thesis, but I have a series of questions. Just got a few observations I thought were worth discussing, and just to bring attention to this issue and say, look, maybe there are better questions we can ask. Maybe there are questions that have not been asked, and provide some caution as to this story because there's a certain lack of evidence. And also, as I'm looking at groups like the SSPX and another group called the Silly Vacantists, Ballad Dodd's statements become far more relevant in light of what these schismatic groups are doing. So, okay, so let's jump in, right? Let me just jump into that. So yeah, that's the Silly Vacantists. That's another schismatic, which is a different one to the SSPX, SSPX or SSPX, whatever. So anyway, those are two groups that we will discuss. But in the process of examining the SSPX and the Silly Vacantists, Ballad Dodd comes up, and Vatican II comes up, and attitudes towards Vatican II and the history prior and the history after, and certain claims and statements, things are said, and yeah, so this is all mixed up. So welcome, Will Centeno. Dragon, good to see you. How are you doing? Yeah. Oh, by the way, so after my Luther talk, I received this just about an hour ago, as you can see, 51 minutes ago. Welcome, Mealy Dave. It says, so my story last night on Luther, the discussion, and remember, the bulk of what I was showing you, at least half of what I was showing you, right, was taken directly from Martin Luther's works, from the official Martin Luther Works series. I have all 58 volumes. Up until recently, there were 55 volumes. I managed to buy the other 3, so I have 58 volumes. And this human says nothing but Catholic lies. Well, I'm not even a Catholic, and I was quoting Martin Luther, so I'm not sure how quoting Martin Luther from Luther's works is a Catholic lie. And then she says, I bet you got, or he says, or whatever, I bet you got your information from the Catholic Church who hates Martin. Shame on you for spreading lies. Should I invite this person on to come and demonstrate? Yeah, funny, hysterical. So welcome, Tom Gyokai. Right, so yeah, Rumours of Darkness. That's what I called this because she wrote the book, The School of Darkness. And if you were looking for evidence of infiltration into the Catholic Church in the book, well, it's kind of missing. She does talk about infiltration into the labor unions and into the schools. And the idea of the Catholic Church infiltrations came much, much later. Came years later, apparently. So anyway, look, all of these details I'm still digging into. This is very raw. This is really me just throwing together something just to give you some perspective, to see where I'm coming from, because I am not buying the standard narrative about this woman. When a man Luther shows you who he is, believe him. Yes, Horse, I agree. Welcome, Century. Okay, right, let's have a look. This is Ballad Dodd. Very happy-looking woman. You know, really looks like she's had a great time there. So, chasing what isn't there. Have you ever been in a situation where you are lost? You're going to be late for an important meeting, and you're not sure of the direction you have to go. So someone tells you, like, hey, look, no. You got to turn down this street, go left here, straight down, then you cross over. And when you get to the yellow sign, you turn right, and you go right. You turn right at the yellow sign, keep going for about 50 meters, then turn left, and you'll be there. And this person, this harried person, rushes off for whatever you've given, or you're the one receiving the direction. Someone tells you, go this way to get to where you're going. And you're driving or walking. And what happens is, they gave you the wrong directions. Now, the thing is, you don't know where to go. So what happens is you keep going faster and faster. And you walk faster and think, did I get this wrong? Did I get this wrong? So these bad directions tend to cause a state of anxiety. But it's the only directions you've got. It's the only thing you've got. And you can only repeat the directions you were given. Now, in a similar vein, What if we were given bad directions and everyone's running down this road in the wrong direction, going to the wrong place because they were given accidentally bad directions or deliberately bad directions, and they're rushing further and further away from the truth because that's the only direction they were told, go here, and they're panicking. And also they're repeating those few words they were given because those are the only words that there really are of substance. There's nothing else. You don't see people going, well, here's a list of the 1,100 communists that were placed into the seminaries that made their way into the Catholic Church. You know, the first guy is called John, and then there's Mikey, and there's Willie and Frankie, because that list is somehow a little bit missing. We don't have those names. Now, of course, you will find people that claim, well, we do know, you know, for instance, Bishop Jiminy Cricket was a communist. How do I know? My feelings. You can tell he looked very suspicious, that guy. Definitely a communist. On the other side of the street, it's like, that guy was a modernist. You can tell he was a modernist. How do I know? My feelings. Because he supported Vatican II, and that makes him a modernist. Okay, that's fine and well. I'm not sure how it meets any standards of evidence, but great. Given directions purposely to get us lost. Yes, Tom Gyokai. Often wonder if just making the accusations is supposed to cause paranoia, and paranoia is the intended effect. Eating your lunch, you just... Yes, exactly. I'm going to bring that up just so everyone can see that, because this is part of where I'm going to go with this. I often wonder if just making the accusations is supposed to cause paranoia, and paranoia is the intended effect. Very well said. Evidence, what's that? Yeah. Okay, so we're chasing what's not there. So we're looking for something that's not there, and this is all we know, and this is all we repeat, and this is really all we're hearing, and this is where everyone's going. What if there's a different story, but you've been now, you're just rushing off in the wrong direction? Now, it appears that Dodd, now this is an example, I just got this from someone I was speaking to an hour ago. So, as I said, take this for what it's worth. It's very raw, but I just want to introduce you to some of the issues and the questions that are here, because there are some things that are not clear, and there's a lot of research that needs to go into establishing these things, because the details can matter. So, Dodd was born into a Catholic family in 1904 in Pacerno, near Potenza, Italy. Her name was Maria Assunta Isabella Vasono. Her mother, Teresa, lived on a farm that had been in the family for generations. When Bella's father, Rocco Vasono, a stonemason, now of course, as you know, this is where we all go, well, you know, the Freemasons were based on the Masonic lodges, on the stonemason lodges. You know, these were stonemasons, and the Freemasons are stonemasons, so her father was a Freemason. Or maybe he was. Maybe because her father was a stonemason, he's an original Freemason. Ask yourself, what if her father was a Freemason? That means that everything she said is a lie because her father's a Freemason, and therefore we can discount literally everything, because that's how it works. Those are the rules. I didn't make them, I'm just playing the game. But her father was a stonemason. Take that for what you will. They were a poor family, apparently. Anyway, they relocate to New York, and Bella was the 10th child born to the family. Now, we would assume that as a Catholic, born at the beginning of the century, she would have been baptized. After Bella's father had a stroke, her husband, John, who had been hostile to Catholicism, called a priest to administer the sacraments to Bella's father before he died. She then held the funeral at a Catholic church, and the burial was in a Catholic cemetery. So, we know she was in a Catholic family, so we can realistically assume she had been baptized. Now, this is from Bella Dodd and the Communist Infiltration of the Catholic Church, Paul Kengor, Crisis Magazine. She was received into the Catholic Church and baptized at St. Patrick's Cathedral on April 7th, 1952. Now, okay, she was born into a Catholic family in Italy. Her father was a Catholic. She was presumably baptized as a child, and now she's baptized again as an adult. This is sacrilege under Catholic canon law, right? But now we've got to look at the nuances, the situation around this, right? We've got to look at the context around this. Now, according to Darkness, Bella V. Dodd, Angelico Press, School of Darkness, not being able to secure her baptismal certificate from Italy after inquiry, she was baptized by Bishop Fulton J. Sheen in St. Patrick's Cathedral, New York, in 1952. Unable to secure a certificate, she was conditionally baptized. Bella Dodd and Bishop Fulton Sheen, Father Brian Van Hove's blog. Okay, now she's conditionally baptized. That changes the picture. The first two, if we just go with this is sacrilege, right? This is outright, according to Catholic canon law, this is sacrilege. And why would Bishop Sheen baptize a woman who'd been already baptized? A Catholic, was born a Catholic. So there's a question. So now, suddenly you get this conditionally baptized, and this now modifies the situation. It alters the context somewhat. Bishop Sheen conditionally baptized her, Ballard Dodd, from communist to Catholic on Catholicism.org. Now we have a second reference. She was conditionally baptized. Now, based on Catholic Church teachings, it would be considered a sacrilege to baptize someone twice. Key points being: 1. Baptism imprints an indelible spiritual character on the soul that cannot be repeated. The Church professes that there's only one baptism, and it should never be repeated, even if performed by Christians not in full communion with the Catholic Church. 3. The Catechism states that baptism cannot be repeated because, like physical birth, there is only one spiritual regeneration. 4. The Church regards validly conferred baptism, even by those not in full communion, as creating a sacramental bond of unity that must be recognized by the Catholic Church. Based on Catholic Church teaching, baptism cannot be repeated. Now, Fulton J. Sheen is a highly respected Catholic bishop. Why would he baptize her twice? That's a question. That's a real question. So, is there evidence for and against? Is this a real argument, right? So let's take this as an example. So Ballard Dodd was indeed baptized twice, once as a child in Italy and again in 1952. Now, let's assume that the baptism in Italy is an assumption, but it's a realistic assumption. So this would be considered a sacrilege and a violation of church doctrine. The church only recognizes one valid baptism per person. Okay? Now, the Catechism of the Council of Trent states that the church only administers conditional baptism when, after due inquiry, doubts are entertained as to the validity of the previous baptism. Notice there's no reference to the validity of her baptism. They just can't find her certificate. It's not that it's invalid, that there's questions. Is your baptism valid? Was it done by a communist, Freemason, a dwarf from Mars that eats babies? Who knows, right? Was it done in an invalid manner? Well, there's no discussion around that. It's just that, yeah, we can't find your certificate. You know what we do? We baptize you again. So actually, hold on. I need to ask the question now. Now, let me just give me one moment to actually ask the question. If we cannot find your baptism certificate, do we baptize you again? Let me find out, okay? Okay, let's have a look and see what we learn from this. If we cannot locate a baptism certificate, do we baptize the child, the adult, again a second time? So, no. The Catholic Church does not recommend baptizing an adult a second time if we cannot locate the baptismal certificate. It is not to be repeated, okay? If there is any doubt about its validity, the Church teaches baptism can only be administered once. Right? So you can do a conditional baptism rather than unconditional rebaptism, but only if there's a serious reason. Now, the question is, do we have a serious reason? Okay? No, I'm not asking Father Justin. I'm using the official Catholic Church AI, which is their research AI. This is the official AI put out by the Catholic Church. So now, do we have an official reason? Do we have a valid reason? Is there a serious doubt about her baptism? No. It's just we can't find the certificate. It doesn't say, well, we don't know if you were baptized by a Freemason cannibal dwarf, right? We don't know that. So understand, there's a question here. There is a question. We need to find more information. That's going to be hard, but we need to find that, right? So now, it's only if there's doubt about the previous baptism, if it's invalid, right? Then. Now, the Directory for the Application of Principles and Norms in Ecumenism states that conditional baptism is only performed if, after careful investigation, a serious doubt persists about the proper administration. There is no question about the administration of the baptism. There's a question about where the heck's the certificate. We can't find it. The church was bombed in World War II. That's why we can't find it. Well, we don't have to baptize you again if that's the case. So what was the question that led to the conditional baptism? Without these facts, we have an anomaly. Do you understand? Does that make sense so far, everyone? That we have an anomaly. We need facts to address this. Now, the facts might exist. I might not have found them. They might be in a book that was published 10 years ago by a famous, whatever. It could be all over YouTube. I just haven't found it, haven't looked, whatever the case might be. But you understand there's a condition here that leads us to ask questions. We cannot just assume, because these details can matter. Now, Bishop Fulton Sheen is no idiot. So we have some issue with the story. There's an anomaly with the story that we need to clarify. And furthermore, a conditional baptism is done privately, not publicly. So, was her baptism done privately or publicly? We need to establish those facts. We need to find out, okay? Because these can matter. Because then we've got anomalies that we are detecting. Right. Now, she's famous, and this is the one piece of advice. Turn left, and then turn right at the yellow sign, and then turn left, and turn right at the yellow sign, and then turn left, and then turn right at the yellow sign, and turn left. This is the one piece of information that is constantly repeated. In the 1930s, we put 1,100 men into the priesthood in order to destroy the church from within. Dun, 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 dun. Right now, they are in the highest places in the church. Does this mean they're in the attic? Seriously, because let's just say, look, I'm not going to go into this in much detail right now, but I am detecting anomalies in her story, some inconsistencies in her story. And the more I look into the story, the less I am buying the story. Now, I am not here saying that there was no communist attack on the church. I am not saying there is no infiltration or attempted infiltration or successful operations. We, however, need to pull back from what I would call the rank hysteria about this. And we need to start asking more realistic questions and define this more realistically. How effective was it? How deep did it go? What was it actually very effective? Or weren't they able to penetrate the church, so they tried a different method? And now, I'll give you one idea. Now, this is very early. As I said, it's very early, very raw. For instance, she claims that in the early 40s, she was in touch with 4 cardinals, not bishops, cardinals in the church who were communists, apparently. This is the impression that one leaves, right? 4 cardinals. Now, to become a cardinal, you have to be over 18, I believe it is, right? 19, 20, 21? To become a cardinal, so to become a Catholic priest, at the time, you were looking at 4 years, I think, of what they call secular training, secular seminary, and then 4 years of theological seminary. So 8 years. Then you become a priest. Then you have to work as a priest for some decades, and if you're lucky, you become a bishop. And then when you've been a bishop for a couple of decades, you become a cardinal. So the typical age of a cardinal, now let's say you've left school, you've done some work for a couple of years, and then you decide, heck, I'm going to go to seminary or whatever, 19 years old, you're going to join seminary. So this was now, it's going to be a while. The church has a list of which churches they consider giving valid baptism. Perhaps your particular church wasn't on that list. Who knows? We have to we need to get facts. White Rose says, I am a Catholic and was baptized twice back in the 50s, once a Methodist, the second Catholic. I wonder why they did that. Perhaps in the 50s they did. Exactly, these are questions we need to ask and we need to find answers. Right, now, she claims now that Stalin instituted a program to infiltrate people into the Catholic Church. Stalin took power in 1924. So we don't know the exact date, but somewhere around 1924, 1925, who knows when exactly. But the earliest he could have done so is somewhere in 1924. So let's start late 1924. He gives this order. 1924, now she's talking about 20 years later, right? So if in 1924, then they had to launch the program and then it had to be successful. So now, if they within 8 years, so let's say 1924, now we got 8 years, that's to the 1930s. Right now we're in the 1930s, and these people have now gone through seminary, and now they're entering the priesthood. From the priesthood, they've got to work their way through and become a bishop. From a bishop, they've got to work their way through for some decades and become a cardinal. Now, let's say they got this guy at the age of 18 or 20 or whatever. Let's just use 20 as a round number in 1925, for argument's sake. In 1945, right, 20 years later, he's now 40 years old. Is he a cardinal? Right? How many youngsters leaving school in 1925 were cardinals by 1944? The question is how many? How many would have made cardinal in a handful of years, right? Would have been in their early 30s, perhaps, and made cardinal. How many? So we should be able to determine which cardinals set world records in going from seminary to becoming cardinal like that. Should be easy to establish those names, right? So yeah, we'd love to find out who those cardinals were. And so there's questions about how quickly do you become a cardinal, right? Now, let's have a look here. So these are questions, things I'll be looking at. I'll be putting together more on that, because how many cardinals, she says these guys were with us. So yeah, these are going to be very young cardinals that still haven't started shaving yet. Now, useful idiots. Now, this is a guy called Boudens, right? Now, he converted to Catholicism while Dodd was still a socialist. Also, with the help of Bishop Sheen. Mike Samal says 0. Yeah, the chances are probably 0, because they would have become cardinals. I mean, look, once I did the maths earlier yesterday, I was playing with the numbers. In like 15 years, so they've gone, by the age of 33, they're now a cardinal, let's say. Potentially by the age of 33, they're a cardinal. It's like, how's that even possible? Okay? So now, infiltration charged. Okay, so the Boudens article charged that communist tactics include infiltration of communists into Catholic organizations and getting certain muddled Catholics to become undercover communists. A muddled Catholic, in other words, a useful idiot. We're getting certain muddled Catholics to become undercover communists. Okay, fine and well. Thanks, Mr. Boudens. So remember, Bishop Sheen got this guy out of socialism, out of Marxism, out of communism, and this guy becomes a Catholic, okay, with the help of Bishop Sheen. So that's apparently the story. So now, New York Times, Dodd terms Boudens dishonest, and she assails Boudens. She attacks him. Washington, April 25, Dr. Bala V. Dodd, former communist, struck hard tonight at the story of another ex-communist, Professor Louis F. Boudens, that Professor Owen Lattimore was known to the communist hierarchy in this country as one of its own. That liar! Okay, so one of Bishop Sheen's converts, and Bala Dodd doesn't like this guy. Okay, that's right. Just file that under F for filed, right? So she has a problem with this guy's story. So there's a little bit of infighting going on here. Didn't expect that, but right. So who's telling the truth? Who's telling the lie? What is the story even about? Something to think about. Now let's have a quick look at Bishop Sheen. Bishop Fulton Sheen claims that the Reds tried infiltration of the Catholic Church. Rome, April 28. Bishop Fulton J. Sheen says the communists began a campaign in 1936. Okay. 1936. So let's go back a little bit. Bala Dodd said that Stalin started a campaign to infiltrate gay, lesbian, homosexual, Martian communists into the seminaries. Now, he gained power in 1924. Now, according to Bishop Fulton J. Sheen, the program started in 1936. The program started in 1936, not 1924. So let's no longer count from 1924. Let's walk from 1936. In 1944-ish, Bala Dodd says she was in touch with 4 cardinals. So if you were 18 in 1936 and you joined the seminary, by 1944 you'd be 26 years old and you've just completed seminary. How many cardinals come straight out of seminary? How many guys go from high school, 8 years of seminary, and bang, you're a cardinal today, buddy. Off you go, cardinal, whoever you are. 0. Nobody. Absolutely, positively nobody. So I'm like, okay, fine. There's a little bit of a timeline gap here. And when I look at some of the things Bala Dodd says, I'm starting to go like, small anomalies here, little timeline issues, questions I've got. So look, now again, this is very early. This is very raw. I'm just looking at these and I'm just giving you my off-the-cuff thoughts. I may well be wrong on everything I'm telling you because I need to go back and research all of this in detail. I need to draw timelines. I need to get, there's little tiny details that matter here. There's church procedure. There's all sorts of things. But do you see the questions here? Do you see the little question marks popping up? Okay? Do you see question marks popping up? Do you think that I am just randomly asking questions that have no bearing on this? Or are there some potential issues here? Things that we really need to ask about. Century Since says the Soviet Union was just barely hanging on after Civil War in 1924. I doubt they had time to plan a multi-decade infiltration. Yes, Century Since. Lenin had just died in January. Stalin had just taken over, and he had to manage a country. So Mike Smile says, White Rose says, no, your questions are quite valid. So we have timeline problems here. Now, also, Dodd says, we infiltrated 1,100 men, 1,100 into the Catholic Church. Oh my God. Yeah, except in other conversations, no, we infiltrated almost 1,000. No, nearly 1,000 people. Nearly. Almost. And then in other days, it's like, well, we put over 1,200 people into the Catholic Church. True story. Over 1,200. It was 1,100, definitely. Over 1,100. It was over 1,200. It was nearly 1,000. We had 900 something. It was nearly 1,000. It's like, okay, okay, right? And then I was in charge of the program. And it's like, I was aware of a program. Okay? So were you in charge, or were you involved? Did you do it yourself? Did someone else do it? Did you hear about it? Were you managing it? There's a couple of questions there too. Let's say there's a little bit of an inconsistency with the reporting. Now, these may be nothing, but it may be something, right? So there's a little inconsistency that I'm a little concerned about. So anyway, Bishop says here in 1936 to infiltrate the Roman Catholic Church in the US, and even tried to plant an agent in his office. The auxiliary bishop of New York warned of communist attempts to destroy the church from within in a sermon at the American Catholic Church of Santa Susana Sunday. He also charged that American Reds tried to infiltrate other places where they could exert influence. In 1936, he said there was not a single leading newspaper columnist or commentator who did not have a communist secretary. Now, given further context of his statements, he doesn't say they did or they succeeded. In fact, he speaks of this in the past tense. He doesn't go, oh my God, the communists have taken over the church. No, none of the panic, none of the hysteria. He phrases this, as far as I've learned so far, that this is all phrased in terms of past tense attempts, not success. So why is everyone freaking out and going, they definitely succeeded and the Pope is a communist, right? So, yeah, so Shabalibis says, I feel at the start Stalin was too busy with the Great Purge and going after Trotsky. So Mike Simar says, she's the one who seems to be undercover. Well, that's a good question. We'll examine that. Right, Beat Down Babylon, welcome, buddy. Long time no see. So, yeah, come to support the man of the Master Archive of Truth. Thank you very much. Okay, so communists are sneaky, but I'm starting to see something that is fishy. Spider 1132, thank you. Yeah, I'm starting to see something fishy here too, as well. Because everyone's repeating the same few lines and everyone's running in the same direction and no one's stopping to go, hold on, is there another? Because let's just say I'm going to present to you a set of ideas that fit the facts just as well. Alternative theories that fit the facts equally well, that are not the standard narrative. Because someone's not thinking here, right? Let's continue. Archbishop Cushing said, and he's here on Time magazine and he's here with John F. Kennedy. Archbishop Cushing said certain religious leaders in America had been victimized by what he called the infiltration tactics of communism. In the communist fight against religion, he said the program and the policies may vary from time to time and from place to place, but the objective is always the same. Whether the communists are flogging a Catholic bishop or flattering a clerical fellow traveler, their objective is the same, to destroy religion by destroying it in the bishop who resists them, or by emasculating it in the fellow traveler who falls victim to the party line. Archbishop Cushing said it was ridiculous to deny that certain religious leaders in America have been victims of this type of communist infiltration. Fair enough. He said the communist-controlled Orthodox churches of the East were virtually destroyed by infiltration. So again, we're not stating there was no attempt. We're not stating that there wasn't some level of success or some successes. I am questioning the degree of the success and if this justifies the hysteria. And we will have a look at that as we go forward. So, Century says, I'm sure the communists tried to influence the Vatican police and the Swiss Guard, plus the other secular figures working there, certainly. This is the same Cardinal Archbishop Cushing with Pope John the 23rd. Now, I'm going to play 1 minute. This is a 3-minute video. I'm going to play 1 minute and 10 seconds of it, okay, for you. Now, we're going to listen to the words. This is a Catholic radio show, and I believe it's a Catholic radio show, and we're going to listen to a discussion, a question being answered by the best researcher on Dodd in the world today, apparently. Apparently, this woman has the reputation as the single best, most dedicated, most thorough, most knowledgeable researcher on Dodd alive today. And I want you to listen to the confidence with which she answers the questions, the direct answers, the clear evidence, the direct evidence, the unambiguous. She's going to waffle, and it's embarrassing. I want you to listen. I'll play this now.
Any hard piece of evidence that we have about the seminaries being infiltrated.
Is that coming through? Oops, because I'm not hearing. I'm not hearing any audio. Yeah, it should be fine. Sorry, did that play? Did you guys hear the audio there? I'll just
play it in this way
again.
Well, there was
not to worry. I'm going to just play it again here. Let me go to my other source.
Any hard piece of evidence that we have about the seminaries being infiltrated in this way.
Sorry, are you guys able to hear this at all? Darn it.
Any hard piece of evidence that we have about the seminaries being infiltrated in this way.
Well, there was a wonderful researcher in Congress, J.B. Matthews, who's written a lot. And
apologies, I had my volume down. So let me just play this again. Apologies for the mess up there. I'm going to play this again and let you listen, okay?
Any hard piece of evidence that we have about the seminaries being infiltrated in this way.
Well,
any hard piece of evidence that we have about the seminaries being infiltrated in this way.
Well, there was a wonderful researcher in Congress, J.B. Matthews, who's written a lot, and he wrote in the 40s and 50s. He wrote about the communists in the Protestant seminaries quite a bit, and
What? This is the best Dodd researcher in the world, apparently, right? Did she just say communists in the Protestant seminaries? Because he asked her, is there any hard evidence for this Dodd thing? And I've been asking the same question. Where's the hard evidence? And I am finding roughly this much. I'm finding this much hard evidence. This much. And he just asked her, what's the hard evidence? And she goes, there's a guy, Frankie, Protestant seminaries were infiltrated by communists. Okay, let's have a quick listen again.
40s and 50s. He wrote about the communists in the Protestant seminaries quite a bit. And they even had someone they called the Red Dean. They spread them out throughout all the Protestant seminaries.
Did she just say Protestant seminaries? They spread them out through. What did she say? Catholic or Protestant? Did I miss something?
And then what I'm thinking is, what do you do with ecumenism?
Now she changes topic because she goes, I have no evidence to give, and now I'm just going to waffle the dean of the college, I guess, the dean of the college.
If all these Protestants have wittingly or unwittingly become communists, then all we have to do mix.
Did she say Catholics or Protestants? Did she say? He asked her, what hard evidence is there for the claims by Dodd? And the answer is, excuse my French, fuck all. There is nothing. Absolutely jack shit, basically, is what it comes down to. But let's continue.
A little ecumenism with that, and it gets out to the Catholics. So they've got a couple of different ways of operating.
So there's ecumenicism, and it gets out to the Catholics because of ecumenism and. Okay, so maybe we need to start investigating the Protestant church. Maybe we need to look at Luther's little corner. I'm Episcopalian. No, I haven't been to the Anglican church for like 15, 20 years because they've been going, let's just say the church of the gay isn't exactly where I want to be, okay? The Anglican church has fallen apart. It's fell off a cliff. It's the church of the LGBT movement, and that's not for me. So there were priests working in communist countries. Are they? So understand now. Hold on. Now, when you listen to this woman talk on other shows, she'll go, well, actually, when you look at the evidence, you've got amazing amounts of testimonies, and then she's wonderfully erudite. She speaks so well. But when she's asked about hard evidence, she stumbles and mumbles, and it's embarrassing. I was embarrassed for her. I was incredibly embarrassed by this. I was like, good golly, like, where's the hard evidence? Well, there was a guy, Frankie, he's on the corner, and Frankie was saying that, that Jimmy's mother's uncle's friend at the seminary was a wife beater in the other town down the road 100 Ks. So therefore, he probably, through his telepathic influence, would have reached out to Johnny, who lives in this town, and Johnny would have been... Yeah, that's pretty much it. Thank you very much. But do you, look, excuse my French here, but do you guys understand that this is not a solid case? This is not a solid case. This is not to say there is no activity, not to say there were some successes, but understand, this is not a slam dunk. This is not by any means cut and dried. There are questions. Someone is not asking the right questions. Someone is looking in the wrong direction. Someone is running in the wrong direction. And we need to stop, turn around, and we need to start asking some hard questions. Yeah. So, let's move on. Okay, let's continue here. Let's go on to the next slide. Now, is there any solid evidence? Well, this is the best research in the world. And she's like, yeah, that's the evidence. There you go. Okay. There is evidence of not having evidence, Gergely or Skolas. Exactly. Now, this is weaker than Biden's concentration. Yeah. And normally she's very erudite. Normally she's well-spoken. She sounds like a real pro, but okay. Now here's a question. Did Ballard Dodd, none of this is definitive. I'm asking questions. We're speculating here. Okay. And if the top researchers and guys like Taylor Marshall can write books that, as far as I can tell, are riddled with errors and filled with speculation, then how so can I. But I'm going to try and stay away from the errors, and I'm going to try and stick to what we call reasoned speculation, right? So, did Ballard Dodd make up a lie that got away from her? Did she cry wolf, and then the story just grew out of her control, and it just went wild? Because maybe it served someone's purpose, right? Maybe it served someone else's purpose, or who knows? Was she a muddled Catholic? Is that why she was upset with the other guy, right? With the other Bishop Sheen convert? Was she a muddled Catholic, and didn't she like being called a name? So my questions are, and I've got about 8 slides on this. Given the lack of concrete or direct evidence that support Ballard Dodd's claims of widespread communist influence in the Catholic Church, and remember, the best researcher was talking about the Protestant Church. So maybe we need to look at the Protestant Church about this. Maybe they need to stop pointing fingers because, anyway. So, during her tenure as a Communist Party member, it is reasonable to consider the possibility that she was complicit, whether she knew or not. And this woman also speaks of knowing or unknowing complicity, right? In a successfully run psychological operation, a PSYOP. Was she part of a PSYOP? Did she know she was part of a PSYOP? Did she run a PSYOP? Was she a victim of a PSYOP? Was she a member of a PSYOP? Right? Designed to create public panic, anxiety, and loss of faith and trust in the church. So, this PSYOP could have resulted in detrimental, negative public relations for the church, weakening its authority, encouraging disobedience, and creating an environment where other subversive groups could deliberately, maybe they initiated it, and in the chaos, they then promoted their own agenda, or groups that saw the chaos, these liberal groups or whomever, modernist groups, they saw the chaos and decided to jump, because they saw the chaos and this was an opportunity to act. So that these groups could deliberately or opportunistically exploit the chaos to emerge by delegitimizing the church and then usurping its authority. Think SSPX, think the Silly-Vacantists, right? The Silly-Vacantist movement. So that's SILLY Vacantist. So they would then set themselves up as a parasitic parallel church. Taylor Marshall comes off as one of those guys Lloyd makes fun of. The church sucks, but you should join it. The anti-promotion. Yeah, no, exactly. Taylor Marshall depresses me when I listen to this man, and I've listened to hours. I just want to go outside and kill myself. I just want the world to end, because please make it stop. It's so dark and negative. It's insane. So it is also possible that Dodd's claims allowed both lay people and clergy who had doctrinal disagreements with the church to attribute any church actions that they disagreed with to communist influence. I don't like that they changed the mass. The commies did it. I don't like that they changed the flavor of wine we use in the church. The commies did it. I don't like that they're using vanilla-flavored wafers and not chocolate-flavored wafers during the Eucharist. That's communist action. That's the commies for sure. I know. It's commies. Only commies would do that. So this would lead to a loss of church membership, because you've got a loss of trust. You've got a loss of faith. You can blame anything you don't like. Anyone I don't like is a communist. Anything the church does I don't like is communism. And thus, you lose papal authority. The Diamond Brothers are saints. Yeah, the Diamond Brothers, there's a question mark. There's a huge question mark there. So, so this blanket accusation, right, this blanket accusation approach may have created a form of hysteria where even unrelated incidents, such as misconduct, crimes by individual priests, were automatically associated with communist subversion. Remember, you're looking for what's not there. You're never going to find it. It's not there. The evidence is not there. The thing you're looking for is somewhere else, or it's minuscule. You've made a mountain out of a molehill. You're looking for the wrong things, and you're fitting everything that you see into the wrong box. Now, there may be issues, but you are trying to fit everything into an agenda. You're trying to make everything communist. Now, there's again further reasons on that, but everything is now associated with communist subversion. They changed the Mass, Vatican II. It's all communist subversion. So, now while my assessment cannot be definitively proven or disproven without additional evidence, it is a plausible explanation for the impact of her actions, of Bella Dodd's actions, on the Catholic Church during that period, because this hammered the Church, right? Now, it is essential that we consider explanations and factors that may have contributed to the perceived decline in the Church's influence and the Church's authority during that time. Now, people will go, well, Bella Dodd was 100% correct. 100%! Because you can tell Vatican II destroyed the Church. They chased everyone away. Well, it's interesting that Vatican II also affected the Baptist Church. It also affected the Lutheran Church. It also happened to affect every other church, because all churches started losing parishioners during that time. So Vatican II was killing the other church. It was so broad that communist H-bomb was so big that it destroyed the other churches. So Vatican II was imposed. So the Catholics beat up the other churches with Vatican II, so that even the evangelicals, the Presbyterians, the Baptists, the Lutherans, the Calvinists, they also lost parishioners. Holy shit, Vatican II was bad. Really bad. It destroyed Christianity worldwide and turned the world onto drugs in the 1960s. No. What this tells us is that you're trying to push correlation and causation. Now look, sometimes correlation is causation and sometimes it's not. Okay? We need to now make determinations. We need to make distinctions. We need to go look at the evidence. So we've got to determine, why did people leave the other churches then? Maybe it was subversion by rock music and drugs and secularism and modernism, and who knows? But was it Vatican II that caused it? Was it the Catholic Church that did it? Or was it other things that influenced the other churches and also influenced the Catholic Church? In things that change society that are out of the control of the Catholic Church? Because can you really blame everything on the Catholic Church? Understand, that makes no sense. That is not logical. That is not sensible. So you cannot... You have to find that there will be other causes that affected society beyond Vatican II. But it is convenient. It's a convenient scapegoat to undermine the church and say, hey, Vatican II caused it. The Rome is Antichrist. The popes are evil. Join my church. We're the SSPX. Join us. We're the Silly Vacantists. Join us because we're good. We're good because the Vatican II caused global warming. Okay. If you say so. Do you understand where I'm going with this? So the panic has made the chaos. So does this make sense to you so far, what I'm saying here? So we need to look at what caused the church's decline in the church's influence and authority during that time. and then further research and analysis will be required to determine the accuracy of any conclusions that we draw. Right, Horst says, the infamous 60s hippie nuns, that brings back memories. So living relatively close to New York City, I need my doses of Lloyd to remember sanity and logical thought do in fact still exist. When I'm not broke, you're my first membership. I'm like, thank you very much, man. Okay, so let's do some logical analysis. I've only got a few pages and I'll be done in about 15 minutes. So the claim that Bella Dodd ran a psychological operation to create the impression of a communist influence. Now, I've got to be cautious here. I'm assuming that she ran it because she was the public face, right? We can equally validly say that maybe she was a member of an operation, right? Or what if she was a legitimate Catholic convert? She left communism. She had some experience. She left communism. However, she was one of those muddled Catholics, or whatever the case might be, and someone gave her bad information. What if someone said, Bella, you're leaving and they're going to kill me. They're hunting me down. They're going to kill me. Here's some information. You need to go to the church. Give them this. Save the church, Bella. Save the church. And Bella's like, I'm on a mission to save the church. I got information that the communists have taken over the church. It's all bullshit information, but she was given it and she believed it. And she goes to Bishop Sheen and she spreads this panic unknowingly. Maybe she's the victim, but she unknowingly provides this false data. It's 99% false. Maybe there's 1% truth. Maybe there's 5% truth, but it's largely false. You are creating the impression when you don't actually have. So let's say they tried to impact the church hard and they couldn't. So what they do is they create the false impression that the false propaganda that they've done this to the church. And that false image is more powerful than the actual reality. People's panic over this false image destroys them, destroys the church, destroys trust in the church. Now, the claim that Bella Dodd ran a psychological operation to create the impression of a communist influence within the church, leading to numerous negative outcomes, will require a logical examination of all available evidence and the plausibility of such an operation. So the lack of concrete or direct evidence of her claims, and there's a huge lack of evidence here, necessitates a reliance on circumstantial evidence or the credibility of Dodd's own testimonies. Now, there's loads of testimonies. None of them have concrete evidence. None of them have direct evidence. It's just talk. It's just talk. That's all it is. So logically, for Dodd's operation to succeed to the extent described, it would require resources and capability. So the operation would need significant resources and insider access to disseminate convincing disinformation. So if this part of the hypothesis is true, we need to start looking who was aiding the process. Who are the insiders in the Catholic Church? Who are the insiders in the media? Right? How was this coordinated? Right? Who planned it? We need to start looking when asking those questions. Next, motive and opportunity. Dodd would need a compelling reason to undertake such a complex operation against the church and the opportunity to do so effectively. So we've already discussed, maybe she was a legitimate convert, but someone gave her false information to save the church, and she took it on as a crusade, as a cause, and she then passed unknowingly false information to Bishop Sheen. Now, when I read Bishop Sheen's reaction, I think Bishop Sheen was very cautious. I don't think he bought it 100%. I think he saw there was an operation, and I'm not saying there wasn't, because there were operations against the Catholic Church. But I think he was very cautious, and he didn't quite believe her 100%. That's my feeling right now. So that's the sense that I get. So the Catholic Church doesn't accept baptism by non-denominational evangelical churches who give you a believer's baptism, or Mormon baptism is not accepted. Thank you, Philip Schaffer. That's a very nice distinction. I much appreciate that. I will look into that. I'll do the research on that, but thank you. That's a good point. The Catholic Church doesn't accept. Awesome stuff. Thank you. If that is true, then great. Thank you for that. Spider1132 says, makes me think of a Sun Tzu tactic. I think it goes something like, if you can't make the leaders weak, trick the soldiers into thinking their leaders are weak. Yes. And Sun Tzu does also say, if you aren't strong, if you aren't big, create the impression of being strong, create the impression of being big. So now she's going to need a compelling reason to undertake such a complex operation. She's a true believer in something. Maybe she was a true communist faking being a Catholic, or maybe she was a true Catholic, right? Who was given false information, or maybe let's assume there's a modernist group. Let's assume there's a modernist parallel group inside a liberal modernist group that wants to take over the church, right? A parasite within the church. So this group, let's call them the BBBX, KKKX, or whatever the heck, right? What if they claim to be the real Catholics? Because the Pope actually died in 1870 and there hasn't been a real Pope since 1870. What if that's their story? And Dodd believes them and she joins them and she's a true believer in the Catholic faith for the most part, but except she believes that all the current popes since 1870 are false popes. So she's a true believer, a true Catholic in a general sense, right? She's like a true believer. She believes in most of the Catholic stuff, except that in 1870 we had the last pope, and there's been no popes ever since, and the current popes are fake, antichrist, heretics, Satanists. So therefore, it's her duty as a good Catholic to undermine the church and destroy it so that they can take over the church and implement a real pope, the guy that she's working for. So what if she was working for another group to implement their agenda? And they just blamed everything on the commies so that while everyone's looking at the commies, this group can go and do its thing. Now, I do understand I tend to use a little bit of hyperbolic language, but do you understand? This is not an implausible situation. This is potentially realistic. Now, obviously, we need to find evidence for it, but this also fits the data. It doesn't contradict the data. This can also be fitted to the data, and we'd say, okay, that's a valid explanation, just like all of the other nonsense speculations that I've seen up to this point. Is there any reported connection with the Golden Dawn Collegiums? I have no idea, David Sands. So, now, she may well, okay, so dedication to her cause would infer that she was a true believer. She may well have left Marxist socialism behind, but did she embrace Catholic orthodoxy, or did she embrace a splinter group that viewed the Orthodox faith as an obstacle and as an enemy? Okay, impact assessment. So, the described outcomes, right? Public panic, loss of faith, undermined authority, suggest a highly effective operation, raising questions about the scale and the methods used. So the scale is high. Now remember, the Bishop Sheen even mentioned that all of the newspapers had had communist infiltration. So this could well be a communist operation that's not inside the church, but outside, mostly outside the church. Some insiders, certainly. But now you've got outside operation, cooperation with the press. White Joe says there can be multiple valid explanations. Exactly. So I'm putting a few on the table, and we want to start eliminating the weaker ones and start moving towards what are the most likely ones. Romeo says, I just noticed that too few Lloyds reminds me of someone on Thaddeus's channel. Yes. So, psychological assessment, right? From a psychological perspective, the operation described would exploit vulnerabilities in human cognition and group dynamics, such as confirmation bias. People are more likely to believe information that confirms their pre-existing beliefs or fears. The commies did it. Oh, they changed the mass. Oh my God, the commies did it. The commies did everything. The commies gave you toothache, right? The commies gave you plaque. The commies make you brush your teeth and you don't like brushing your teeth twice a day. Whatever. In-group versus out-group dynamics. Creates an us versus them scenario, right? This causes division and pits Catholic versus Catholic, right? And this can lead to increased cohesion within a group because it's us now versus them, so we cohere against an enemy, but also it creates hostility towards perceived outsiders. And we do have this situation. This situation is real with the trad Catholics, right? These crazy trad Catholics, right? There's not been a real pope since the World Cup in Brazil 1950. Well, yeah, I mean, you pick your date, right? Now, authority undermining, right? Loss of trust in established authorities can lead to a vacuum where alternative, possibly extreme voices gain undue influence. That's your Silly Vacantists. That's your Bishop Lefebvre's. That's your SSPX. Do you understand? Now, influence on the church. Now, the alleged operation's impact on the church would be multifaceted. Internal division. So by sowing distrust and encouraging accusations of communist infiltration, the operation would aggravate existing divisions within the church. Everyone's going to be pointing fingers. You would create a state of paranoia, a state of panic. You'd create heightened tensions. You're going to create a lot of craziness and upset. So does this make sense so far? Right? Besides my crazy examples and so on, but does this all make logical sense so far to you. Now, external perception. So negative PR, and that's public relations, and perceived loss of moral authority, right, would diminish the church's influence in societal matters. Notably, this was one aim of a known Russian anti-Catholic operation. I covered this previously in my Hitler series. We know for a fact that the Russians did launch an operation against the church in the 1950s. They succeeded in creating a deeply negative impression of Pius XII. They made him look like Hitler's Pope. That was the whole point of the operation, to smear and slander the Pope and thus the Catholic Church. It was called Operation Seat 12, if I remember. And the Russians launched this against Pope Pius XII. This is a known Russian operation. However, they weren't inside the church, they were outside the church. Very cleverly done. Now, we've got to look at the legitimacy of the claims. So, the operation could make any genuine concerns about communist influence or other issues within the church harder to address credibly, because genuine concerns, genuine evidence would be lost in a sea of wild accusations, wild speculation. So this chaos of claims could potentially allow cover for other subversive groups, whether deliberate or opportunistic, right? Allowing them to blame their actions on the ongoing litany of communist activity. That's what I would do. Because look, my job is to work against bad guys. My job was to think like a bad guy. How do I stop the bad guy? The bad guy wants to break in here and do something bad. The bad guy wants to break in here and kill someone. Maybe me, because that was my job too, right? I've got to make sure that the people around me don't die, right? Me included. I assume I've succeeded because I'm still here talking to you guys. So I have to think like the bad guy and plan like the bad guy. So I'm thinking, what would I do if I were the bad guy? And this is what I would do. This is what I would do to create the chaos. This is how I would infiltrate, right? So centuries since it makes sense. Okay, hold on. I'm just going to grab this. Yeah. So Century says, it makes sense. I think she was more of a dupe rather than a mastermind. Yeah, either one is correct. But yeah, I suspect dupe is a reasonable alternative explanation. Over-Atex says, alternatively, even if the infiltration was limited, if it was effective in spots, it may have been used to promote anti-orthodox priests, while the panic created by the psyops serves as cover. Yes. Now, I have found a reference that does state the following. I need to check it. I have not. I've just been told about it. I need to have a look at it myself, right? And we need to verify the data. We need to verify the evidence. But I can give you one example. So there's a process, apparently, I'm told. I don't have first-hand evidence. I was told this. I need to get the book. I need to check it. But apparently the book contains dozens and dozens and dozens of case studies based on hundreds of case studies, right? So it contains a whole selection of case studies from many more case studies. So apparently when priests go into the Catholic Church, they're evaluated for their suitability. And if they meet certain criteria, they're included and they become seminarians, and they go through the training process and they become priests, right? And the bad ones are weeded out. Now, according to the book, apparently what happened is that in some locations, the selectors, the people who did the assessments and brought these priests into the church, they were communist sympathizers. They were people who were antithetical to the church. So they would reject people who showed good tendencies to be priests. The people who had the good characteristics, they would reject them from the program. And those who showed tendencies to be gay, or those who showed tendencies to be communist, they promoted those guys. And that's how you got all of these people into the church. So understand, we need to look at hard evidence. We need to look at realistic methods. We've got to be practical. We've got to look at evidence, and we've got to find out, because the way that Dodd stuff is described, like it happened by magic. She waved a magic wand and things happened. It's like, okay, can we be more specific than that? I need facts. I need a method. It takes time. We need people. We need names, and we got all names. Nothing. So yeah, so understand, this would be one method, right, where they could reject the good applicants and the bad applicants are all pushed into the seminaries. That's where you get your gays, that's where you get your criminals, that your fraudsters, your financial embezzlers, and that's how you get all your commies in. Because the people doing the selection, they would have picked very, very specific ways to get them in. So hopefully that makes sense, right? Hopefully that makes sense to you. So So these groups that were doing this could blame all of their nonsense on commies. They could just keep pointing at the commies. And you know what? the public's pointing at the commies too. So it's like everyone's doing their job for them instead of thinking, how did they do this? Then there's a concrete, specific method they use. We have to find this. Right. Now, comparison with other operations. Right. So Tom Gurka says sad and absolutely true. So can you tell me what specifically would be sad and absolutely true according to you? Right. So comparison with other operations. So comparing this scenario with known psychological operations or influence campaigns, several common elements emerge. Right. Strategic misinformation. So this is very similar to operations that aim to destabilize political entities or to sow discord. The described operation uses strategic misinformation to achieve its goals. So I think there was definitely strategic misinformation provided here, right? So Beatdown Babylon says, I never put the infiltration variables into the church after learning of it. Incredible, such bastards, yeah. Century Sin says, St. John's Seminary in California likely had that. Tons of terrible priests came out of there. So who was doing the selection? They didn't just walk in the door casually. Who was the gatekeeper? That's the question you've got to ask. Who was the gatekeeper? Who allowed them in, right? So, yeah, Justin Trudeau is 100% communist. His father was communist. Come on, man. So there are criminals in the church? Yeah, for sure. I mean, hey, there's criminals there's always been criminals in the church. Like, hello. Now, so let's continue. Long-term impact. So like other successful operations, the effects are not just immediate, but have a lasting implication on trust and authority. Even today, Catholics are going, well, the priest is satanic. The Pope is satanic. Rome is the Antichrist. You're like, okay, and the church is those guys down the road, right? Exploitation of existing fears. Effective operations often exploit existing societal fears or tensions, as would be the case here with fears of communism. This was at the height. She came out with her story at the height of the Red Scare. So this would have been a great time to exploit exactly that. And this was also at the time when Stalin was doing his thing with Operation C-12 to undermine Pope Pius XII. Yeah, Tom Gilkay says it's true that many priests who got ordained should never have been ordained priests. And Neil D says it will be difficult to get rid of commie influence within the church. The tentacles are deep. Well, who knows? Who knows, right? Maybe they didn't get in as deep as we think. Who knows? So look, there will be alternative ways to look at this. There will be. You cannot blame everything on the commies. That's magic. That's like saying that they wave fairy dust and they just get away with things. Like, no, there's going to be a method. There's going to be a cell that operates according to certain rules. They're going to be in certain positions. We have to be able to discern the method, the system, the mechanism. You can find it. There's always a method. My job is to look at an environment and figure out how they were doing it. So, where is one of those 1,100 people who recanted or got drunk and spilled the beans? People can never keep a secret. Now, that is a question that came up today, Philip. Thank you very much for that. That is a very real question. Where is one of those 1,100 who recanted or got drunk and spilled the beans? People can never keep a secret. So not one of those 1,100 people got drunk, told his mistress, told his wife, told his priest in confession. Not one. Not one. So, so as the saying goes, wrap the lie in a truth. The question, which is which? The most effective lies are like that. Yes, that's communism. You wrap the lie in the truth, right? Mix the truth with the lie. So, yeah, Philip, thanks for that. And it's Philip that gave me many of the ideas that I'm discussing here today. So, effective operations will exploit existing fears, and this was the case with communism. Some final and additional considerations. Without direct evidence, assessing the truth and impact of Dodd's claims requires very careful consideration of the context in which they were made, including the historical and social climate of the time. Now, final slide, final few points. Comparing Dodd's alleged operation with documented psychological operations could provide us insights into its feasibility and potential effectiveness. So we've got to model this. We've got to model this operation on known operations that did the same. Once we work out the mechanisms, the methods of operation, the positions of influence occupied by the people who implemented this operation successfully, once we've modeled ones that are close to this, we can then apply that and have a look. How would they have done this in the Catholic Church if they did? Then we can start to work out exactly how the cell operated, what their methods were, how they passed messages, and so on and so on. by modeling an existing model that worked, one that was successful. Understand? Then we can start to map this out and get to something concrete, not just fiction and speculation. Yeah, Yuri Bezmenov would have mentioned something. That's very true. Yeah. He gives some fascinating information. So in conclusion, the scenario described, I believe, is plausible given the right conditions and strategies. Yet the lack of concrete evidence means we have to be cautious to fully accepting the narrative without further substantiation. So caution's advised. But then again, the standard Dodd narrative is just, I'm not seeing any evidence for it either. There's speculation, there's fear, there's panic, there's paranoia, there's screaming and shouting. I'd like some hard evidence, please. Now, the implications of such an operation. Now, look, after 50 years or 60 years of running around, like a headless chicken after the Dodd story and coming up with nothing, maybe that means that story is bogus, or you're looking in the wrong place, or you're asking the wrong questions, or maybe your enemy that you're looking for isn't as ubiquitous as you think. Maybe you need to start asking new questions. Maybe you need to look in different places. Maybe you need to stop what you're doing and do something else, for God's sake. So the implications of such an operation, if true, will highlight the powerful role of psychological operations in shaping perceptions and influencing institutions like the church. White Rose says plausible, but much more likely explained by the outside culture. Yes, that's a very good point. That is a fair point. So now, the scenario that I've put forward, or the scenarios or the variations, I've got kind of a scenario with a few variations, right? The scenario fits the data as well as the standard narrative does. What I've put forward, I believe, fits the data as well as the standard narrative does. And the more I read into the standard narrative, the less I believe it. So yet, in my view, my scenario that I'm putting forward provides a more rational interpretation of the ensuing decades of hysteria and ongoing undermining of the church. It's not the Russian doing it. It's people who are disobedient because they've lost faith in the church, because they assume, based on propaganda, that the church is owned by the Russians. That fear, that paranoia has been instilled into them based on perception, false perception, and on that basis, they reject the church, they rebel against the church, because everything's the Russians, right? They're justified to recognize and resist. I see the Russians. Yeah, maybe you need to get that log out of your eye. So, now, the standard scenario, the standard Dodd scenario, right? The typical ones. As you saw, the best research on Dodd, Protestant churches, Protestants, maybe ecumenism, Protestants. Yeah, great job. Very impressed, deeply impressed. So the standard scenarios are neither proven nor conclusive, and they are speculative too. They are very speculative. It all works on, there's no direct evidence. It is all secondary. So, but these speculations are wielded as a weapon against the church. These speculations are wielded as a weapon. And I think that was the whole point. That was the point. Harriel Johnson, thank you very much. Much appreciated. Thank you. She says, a small gift. No, thank you very much. Much appreciated. Wild Rose says, okay, well, let's see here. Neil D says the church is too big to be owned by any one group. And that's probably true. I'd say the church is still the church. I mean, if your captain is drunk, you still don't jump overboard. And I've got to thank Philip for that as well, that comment. You don't jump overboard or find yourself on a raft. You stay on the ship. The captain will sober up, or you'll get a new captain. White Rose says, I agree with your proposal and look forward to see the fruits of your research. Thank you very much. So now the standard scenarios are neither proven nor conclusive and are all speculative. Right? This is all wielded as a weapon against the church. This is all circumstantial evidence. So I'm saying we need to rethink how we are looking at that evidence. We need to rethink our questions. We need to look in different places. We need to start tugging on different threads. And all of this leads me to infer that those narratives are deceptions. All of the standard narratives are deceptions designed to be adversarial, not helpful, because they're pointing you where there's nothing. They're pushing you in the wrong direction. You're never going to find answers. And after 70 years, you know how many answers we found? Nothing. You saw Mrs. Great Researcher She has no clue. It's all speculation. It is all secondary. It's all tertiary. It's all make-believe. So, yeah, fantastic. So these are deceptions designed to be adversarial, designed to never allow you to find the answer because you're looking in the wrong place. We need to stop, turn around, and start looking in a different place. That's my story. This is where I am. So yeah, but B-Town Babylon says, many are simply bitter at the church for their perception of being lied to. Yes. And Bishop Fulton Sheen did say people hate the church for what they think it is, not for what it is. And this is as true of Catholics as it is of non-Catholics. So Shabiliebe says, lots of smoke and mirrors. That's what I believe. At least that's what I'm proposing. That's what I'm proposing. We need to look at realistic scenarios where it's been done politically, in governments, in organizations. Remember, Dodd wrote about infiltration into labor unions and schools. We know they succeeded in universities and schools. That's no doubt. But the idea of her books says nothing about the Catholic Church. She doesn't talk about that. And the whole story about the Catholic Church comes way later. She gets onto that way later. It's like out of the blue, like, huh? Okay, where'd that come from? So Mark Brown says, Lloyd, are you labeling Archbishop Lefebvre and the SSPX as a negative for the church? Yes. Yes and yes. In case there's any doubt, for sure, yes. Yes, yes, and yes. Schismatics. 100% schismatics. A parallel, parasitic church. He has placed himself on a pedestal as an anti-pope. They have placed themselves as a parallel church looking to siphon people across into their particular little raft from the Catholic Church and to usurp the position of the church. That's exactly what they've done, and that's what they do. So yes, that's exactly the case. Okay, so that's my story. So any last comments before I wrap up here? Yeah, please put all your hurt feelings reports in the chat and the comments later. Well, please put all your hurt feelings reports in the comments. I'm sure I'm going to get many of them. So yeah, let me know. I expect all the emails and I expect all the chat comments and social media stuff. And yeah, I'm sure a lot of people are going to be very, very upset. But send me all your hurt feelings reports. I will make sure that I put them in the round file. The round file is under my desk here by my feet. I'm going to drop them in there. And they will be processed correctly. What is my opinion on fiducia supplicans? No opinion at all. I'm not a Catholic. What do I care? So, yeah. So anyway, this is my story. So that I'm looking at the situation and I do not believe the standard Dodd story. I think it's fishy. I think someone's not thinking. If everyone's saying the same thing, no one's thinking at all. It's that simple. The round file's in the bathroom. We have a separate room for that one. The round file, I've got a separate room. Yeah. So, guys, with current technology, it's possible to find cardinals that could be infiltrated. Look, I mean, I use technology heavily. I mean, yeah, I use technology. It's not perfect, but it does help. But look, I mean, I'd love to see those 19-year-old cardinals. The ones that Dodd was talking to, those 25-year-old cardinals. Send me the names anytime. Send me the names, 25-year-old cardinals. Yeah, I'm looking forward to those. You send them any day, man. But when I think about that, I'm like, Bella, are you sure that we got to believe you on that? Because yeah, Bella, I'm not sure. Yes, based on extensive research of the actual church documents, councils, canon law, etc., papal statements. Yeah, the SSPX are schismatic 100%. Yeah, I actually covered that a couple of days ago. I actually went through exactly many of the Catholic documents. I actually went through that. They are definitely schismatic. When the Catholic Church calls them schismatic over and over, everyone else is just in denial about it. Seriously, the SSPX and their supporters are just in sheer denial. The Catholic Church has called them schismatic so many times. It's like everyone's like, well, actually it doesn't mean schismatic because you see, basically, it's a verb, right? But they actually use it in the sense of a noun because when it's used in a document and the past participle of the cardinal verb goes before the E after the I, which comes before the C but goes before the D, then actually it becomes a noun, and then it actually doesn't mean schismatic. And yeah, that's pretty much like, okay, whatever, man. 19-year-old cardinals, that's a good one. So No, I mean, look, I didn't particularly set out to say anything to Kennedy Hall. I had SSPX's constant. Look, I didn't give a shit about Martin Luther. I didn't know who he was. I didn't even care, honestly. But people kept saying things about Luther in the chat during my talks, and they would kept saying things, and I would go research those things, and I'd find that's wrong, and I'd go research the next one, and that's wrong, and that's wrong, and that's wrong, and eventually I was like, okay, fine, I'm gonna have to have a look at this, and I started digging into Luther, and I found out Luther is like Satan incarnate. Okay, the guy was a whack job, complete nut job, absolute monster, a bad man, the villain in the story. Right? The same token, I've got SSPX people coming in. Well, Lloyd, you know, the SSPX has been around since 1400 BC. We were the original Catholic Church. In fact, we were Jewish before there were Jews. And then, like, or whatever. It's like I'm reading the stuff and I go look up canon law and I go look through the councils and I'm like, that's wrong, that's wrong, that's wrong, that's a lie, that's wrong, that's wrong, that's wrong. So I was like, okay, fine, I don't believe this story because I'm finding too many errors, too many mistakes. And eventually I'm like, okay, look, I don't believe the SSPX story. Me looking at this, I'm finding them to be wrong too often to give them credit. I just can't credit those arguments. I've actually built an expert system. I have entered a ton of data, right? I've carefully collected a ton of data, dumped it into a system, had it all indexed. I've downloaded everything I could find from the SSPX. I have it on my hard drive. I have it indexed. I've got over 1,400 documents of the SSPX that I've indexed, right? Some of those will be duplicates, but I've downloaded literally everything I could find on the SSPX website, every document I could find. I've indexed over 1,400 of their documents. And I've started doing data mining. I've done extensive data mining. And this costs money. This is not free. I have to dump in stuff and have my AI read this stuff. So, and then I've got to read this myself. I have to understand it. So yeah, I do not buy the SSPX narrative. I do not buy the Silly Vacantis narrative. They're both wrong, bluntly. They're both wrong. So I didn't look to start a fight. I didn't look to end a friendship with anyone. I just had people keep telling me things. I research it. It's wrong. And I'm like, okay, it's wrong. There's my stand. Fine. So yeah, I mean, look, trust me, you pay the money, you get the results. It's not perfect. AIs are not perfect. There are flaws, there are issues, but they have data. So, you know. So guys, thank you very much. We'll call it a night. Hopefully that answers. I'm sorry. As I said, the hurt feelings reports, drop them in the comments later. I will make sure they get processed. They'll get added to the round file under my desk, and we will deal with those appropriately. So, yeah. So guys, thank you very much. That's the story. And as I said, this is not final. This is my speculations, but I believe I'm presenting a reasonable case here, an alternative that fits the facts. And I do not accept the standard narrative on ballot Dodd. There are too many issues that I'm finding, too many questions, questions that weren't asked that start to destroy this narrative. So guys, always arrive when the stream ends. Hypostatic, too bad. Neil Brown, every Catholic on the planet is in danger of what a stupid claim to make it the SSPX. Actually, according to Catholic canon law, yes, they are. According to even not just ecclesial law, but divine law, they are outside of the line of apostolic succession. Therefore, they are outside the church, and therefore that is mortal sin. Yes. So, man, I have read far more of Catholic canon law councils than I ever expected I would in my whole life. So, guys, take care. Good.